Hello and welcome to Proptech, the property podcast focused on issues that impact the future of the real estate industry. I'm your host, Gavin Morgan, and in addition to looking forward to today's and future conversations, if you'd like to know a little bit more about me, please look on www.propnex.com. That's www.propnx.com. Or if you'd like to chat privately, drop me a line on gavinrmorgan@propnex.com. That's GAVINRMORGAN at propnex.com on email. Kevin Anderson, good morning and welcome to the Proptech podcast.
Thank you for having me, Gavin. Happy to be here.
No, I'm excited about this conversation, Kevin. I know it's going to be a good one, particularly speaking with not only an all-round good guy, but the self-proclaimed most experienced commercial real estate professional with very limited commercial real estate experience, as I believe you told me. But joking aside, Kevin, maybe you could just open things up with a bit of an introduction about yourself for the listeners, please.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Kevin Anderson. I'm calling in here from my house in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I spent my entire career, apart from my short stint in the golf business, I spent my entire career in property technology and co-working technology. And candidly, Gavin, I'm really excited to talk to you about this. I feel exceptionally lucky that, I kind of fell ass backwards into commercial real estate and property technology. And now I'm alive and in the prime of my life at one of the biggest inflection points of the industry. And I feel like I'm somebody who can make an impact and, at least has a lot to say. Dude, apart from that, I'm an avid golfer. I'm a very proud Philadelphian. I'm super close with my family. And I'm super, super excited to be here, Gavin.
Thanks, Kevin. And likewise, as I mentioned, great to have you on. You talked about that inflection point, managed future workspaces. Let's start having a conversation about how you see those playing out in the future, what they are, and where owners need to move, where corporates need to move to get to the optimal model.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big topic, but something that you and I obviously spend a lot of time thinking and talking about. I think managed office right now is just getting started and in its infancy. Candidly, right? We've got this point where everyone realizes that they can do their work from their home. There's no need to go into the office just to appease your boss or show up on an attendance report. But when we talk about managed office, 10 years ago, it was maybe a 12 by 10 office for one or two professionals or sales professionals or traveling executives. Then it kind of gravitated towards the WeWork of an entire floor. Now we're seeing multiple floors, entire buildings sort of be flexified. And the meaning of flex has changed quite a bit. Flexibility, a lot of times 5 years ago referred to pretty much strictly the terms. Right. And you got some furniture, you got maybe some goldfish that you could pay $5 a bag for, whatever. But now we've started to see that these owners are realizing, wow, I really need to take my building to the next level if I want corporate occupiers and their employees to care, right? Leasing velocity is one thing. Getting a building leased is one thing. But what these owners are starting to realize is I actually need people to come to the building. And foot traffic matters for me in my building and how much money I make. So, you hear a lot of folks talk about the hospitality of the hotel industry. Well, we're starting to figure out in the office, but I think taking candidly, the two worst things about the office, the hotel experience and putting them in an office and calling it hospitality is, kind of disingenuous, and we're not quite there yet, right? Like, what's the best part about the hotel? It's not the fact that it's kind of easy to check in and it's kind of easy to get into the elevator, which is what we've kind of copied and pasted into office buildings. The best part about the hotel is that I'm on vacation. I'm going somewhere. Things have been done for me. My room is being cleaned for me, right? So I'm getting good recommendations on restaurants. I'm on vacation, right? So I think we are kind of missing the point when it comes to hospitality by saying, oh, somebody might greet you at the front door and maybe they know your name, maybe they don't. Hospitality is creating the feeling of I want to be here, I belong here. And I don't know that we've quite gotten there yet. And I think we're candidly still a pretty good ways away.
Does that dictate a future where the right workplace needs to have hoteliers, office operators, flex operators. Do you think the future is? Do you think the future is led by owners who are trying to bring all of that into assets? Particularly when we speak about flex, do you think the third-party flex operators that we have today still play a fundamental role? Do you think the balance shifts between third-party flex, who are by quite some distance, the biggest providers of flex, I mean the organizations that lease space in buildings, versus landlords? Um, how do you think that informs? How do you think what you've just said informs the future of all this?
Good question. Very well stated. One, I think your first question around the operators versus landlords. I think operators right now serve a necessary function, which are basically the financial vehicle that an owner can have a flexible offering in their building, right? And I'm not a CFO, but I used to live with one. I understand these things at a surface level, but a lot of what a WeWork or an IWG provide is the financial instrument to make flex viable for their building. And this is America, right? We just saw SVB about 2 weeks ago get absolutely bailed out. The pen is mightier than the sword in this country, right? So I think that the necessity of workspace operators is probably going to go down as landlords figure out different and are offered different financial vehicles to be able to offer flexible buildings. And capital markets groups start to value flexible floors in a different way than fully leased floors.
Operators are going to decline. I think the flex market is going to get a lot bigger, and
Yes.
the exponential growth in the future, and I believe that's what you're saying, will be led by landlords, while the
Yes.
operators continue to grow at a pace too.
100%. Yes. Thank you for the translation. Yes. I think that we take a lot of things that WeWork did and we apply them to landlords and flex in the activation of a building. A lot of those things that we sort of imagine are the solution to the problems are just things that kind of happen, right? Like the activation of the building, a lot of the stuff that was really, really, popular to investors in 2018 and 2019. I mean, you've seen the documentaries. They were fake. They were actors being paid to hang out in the studio, or I'm sorry, in the office.
Yeah,
But the one thing that WeWork did prove beyond the shadow of a doubt is that occupiers will do just about anything to not sign a 10-year lease, right? And
yeah,
guys like me used to banjo around in 2019. We were fighting over leases. I used to call it the Harry Potter space, right? I worked for a place called Common Grounds. Common Grounds contained WeWork, Industrious. We were fighting over the 7% structural vacancy that landlords had at the time, the crappiest floors in the buildings, signing insane leases just to be able to participate. And we used to say things like, something's going to happen where the occupiers are no longer going to accept these 5 and 10-year leases. I didn't mean to jinx the entire planet. I didn't think it was going to be the plague, but we all used to say things like that. And now it's happened incredibly quickly. So landlords are going to be the bulk of that, are going to be a huge part of that growth. And they just have to be. It's sort of the math of the situation, right? Like fully leased floors are not as popular. It's just the supply and demand, right? So we've got to change the supply to be more flexible. Just by the numbers of how much square footage is out there that is not flexible yet, the landlords are going to have to convert it. And I think this is not a new thought, that the operators that do exist are the ones that are going to change and morph and have a more of a similar relationship, like a landlord and a Marriott, than a landlord and a specialty leased occupier who's kicking us some extra dollars if they make a little bit more money.
yeah.
So go ahead. I think I cut you off, Gavin.
No, you didn't, Kevin. And really, really interesting there. And when I look at what you're saying and the situation moving forward, I always like to look at the common sense. The common sense test. For a myriad of different reasons, tenants want shorter leases and more flexibility. I mean, their businesses grow, they shrink. There's mergers and acquisitions. It suits them a lot better to have flexibility and for most organizations, particularly most listed organizations who are growth driven, committing to 10 years for a specific piece of space, it just doesn't fit it doesn't meet the needs of their business. And they can't really anticipate what those needs are going to be 10 years out. So there's a big driver. There is a profit play for landlords in providing what we're talking about, but it is a pivot of the ages. I think, for the landlord community to get to the model. And one of the things that I would like to encourage on this podcast is for owners to continue to look for the solution. I mean, there's a lot of great owners out there trying fantastic experimentation in this space. I don't think anybody's quite got there with the end game model yet. There are some have made a lot more progress than others, but the result will be I do think the end game will produce better partnerships between landlords and tenants rather than what are often quite confrontational long lease arrangements that we have in place at the moment. Have you anything to say to that?
I mean, I love the word that you used there, which was progress. And I think that a lot of owners are starting to kind of realize that their customer is no longer, their sole customer is no longer able to be the capital markets. They've got to start to consider the everyday user that walks into the building and not just outsource that to 2 or 3 or 4 different vendors. They need to take some kind of control of what's going on in their building because it's going to be indicative of their brand. I think that real estate is an industry that has a lot of black and white solutions and a lot of sort of, you reach a number or you reach a threshold. Yes. You can't get that margin. No. And so for 100 years, we've all kind of had a pretty copy and paste type of style of working together in this industry. And now we do not live in that world. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people like to do work or figure out a problem in the vacuum and then say, I've got it, and then put it to market. Yeah. Where this is, to me, this problem right now is unsolvable because the problem has not yet been defined. So like there are still, the macro problem is offices are less in demand. That's just a fact, right? It's never going to be as in demand again. But the amount of days people want to go into the office. What is an office building valuable? What drives people into the office? What's the reason for the office? These things I don't think the occupiers have quite figured out yet. So it's up to the landlord just to show a little bit of progress, try something new, and see what sticks. And I'm not suggesting you spend $333 a foot building out spec suites that are on steroids. I'm saying maybe you kind of alluded to this earlier. Maybe there are different partnerships that you need to have beyond your FM and your flexible office provider. Maybe they are small service providers like, I don't know, somebody who's going to give me a haircut or deliver my packages or, one of these indoor golf simulators, something that would, kind of circling back to the hotel conversation. I go to a hotel because I have a destination. What is the destination for me to go to the office? And it's not the cubicle that's a little bit too close to the bathroom where so-and-so is going to peek over my shoulder and ask me why I'm looking at the Mad Men Reddit during work hours. It's something fun to do, right? And I think we all miss our colleague. How can we hang out with our colleagues at the office, be trusted to use the space and not be sort of watched, Big Brother-ish, and then kind of go from there. So I lost my train of thought there for a second. So thanks for sticking with me. But I think like these landlords are going to have to do a bit more to get people to come back to their building. And I think it's something that is not a solution that's solved in a vacuum. We need to start to communicate better with the end users of the space to see what they actually want, right? The people who are in these buildings are like very self-expressive people, right? We're millennials, right? We've got stickers on our laptops. We spent $4 billion of our parents' money on the Sims video games and the Roller Coaster Tycoon video games. We want to build our future. Let us be a part of what the office design might be like. That's a very cheap sort of incentive of, hey, you're going to work here. What do you want there?
Yeah, but I think I don't think it's a situation that the landlords don't want to solve for. COVID has accelerated the market to a point where there are certain things that were being contemplated that are now absolutely established, like things like hybrid work as part of the future, and the need for the office to be that dynamic location where you can not just work, but where you can actually enjoy yourself. You can boost your productivity by being in an environment that you like being in. Providing for that as a landlord is really difficult because you've got to do it. I mean, it's a business and it's got to be done profitably. It's the same for an operator partner as well. It's got to be done profitably. So that's probably challenging the timeline that people like us want to see compressed. But it will be interesting watching the journey, and I think we can play a big part in helping owners and operators get there. But it's It's that, and I'm repeating myself now, but it's doing it commercially, which is going to be, really cracking the nut.
You know what is tough, and I'm just kind of pointing this out. I don't really know that I have a solution, but we were talking about two things that are really tough to intermingle. The first one is, the financials, the commercials, and dude, like, what my dad always says is, I can lay in bed and not make any money. So I'm not sitting here saying, suggesting that this is not a commercial. This is a commercial building, right? They're not office
Yes.
buildings, they're commercial buildings. They exist to make money. But when we talk about all these things, we say a lot of things about feelings, right? We want people to feel productive. We want people to feel welcome. Feelings are things that are, very difficult to measure. Who do I love more, my mom or my dad, my kid or my dog? That's a hard thing to answer, right? So there needs to be, and there's going to have to be some element of trust and some element of lack of control for the landlord to kind of embrace, to have that sort of the methodology that you spoke about just a minute ago, to experiment and be willing to fail. I think that's what is sort of like a linchpin that needs to be removed, is the fear of failure that exists, because
Yeah.
these are commercial buildings that have very much been black and white decisions by the numbers, and now we're injecting things like, well, we want people to want to come here. How do you create want? Well, you've got to experiment a little bit. Like, look at that. Look at marketing agencies, right? You have to spend some money that you're going to waste, but then you're going to know where the good dollars go, and you can increase the good dollars.
Yeah. But in a time like this, Kevin, I think that'll be really hard for a lot of owners because it's a bit of a perfect storm. Unfortunately for landlords at the moment, they will get through it, but it's a challenge. I have always felt that the right solution to this problem lies in specific curation. And what I mean by that is, if I'm a landlord, even if I've got a full asset, I'm looking at the tenants that I want to have in that asset in 5 years. Uh, and I'm interviewing those tenants. I'm really deeply understanding what they want. And I'm starting to build that asset around them while they're in the asset to the greatest possible extent that I can. And that leaves me, I think, in 3 to 5 years with capital that I've invested in driving better partnerships with the client base that I want in an asset that they increasingly want to be in because of the impact that it's having on the productivity of the people that are working in it. What I'm still seeing today is too many owners doing what you're talking about, which is well intended investment in stuff, in lobbies, like gyms and things like that. And of course, they'll never make a profit.
Yeah,
And trying to solve for tenants' needs without actually asking them what they want. And I think we'll see that. I hope that we'll see that flip soon, and we'll see landlords moving forward off a basis of specific curation, of course, related to what they want, rather than the way it's mostly being done at the moment, which is specking money into ideas and then being disappointed when it doesn't work because, of course, it isn't going to when you haven't specifically curated it for the audience that you want to cater for.
yes. I mean, like, specifically, the gym concept. I mean, the last thing I want to do is run into my boss while I'm sweaty and panting and not able to do a pull up, right? Like, I, I think there are certain things that you don't want to
But you'd be happy
intermingle.
being caught in the golf simulator.
I'd be happy to be caught in the golf simulator. Absolutely. That's the thing, is, right? Give people places where they can kind of be themselves and show off who they are, because there's this whole new element of work that has been introduced that didn't quite exist, when offices were originally built, which is I mean, I'm sure it existed, but it's a little bit on hyperdrive now, and it's harder to control from your house. And that is the popularity contests, the politicking, like the relationship building, right? These are things that are inherently really, really valuable to your career. You need a place to be able to do them. You don't need a place to get heads down work done anymore. You've got that at your house, right? You almost don't need a place to do conference rooms anymore, or sorry, conference calls anymore, because you can do that at your house too. But what you need is a place where you can start to build relationships and start to bring yourself to work. And that's what all these occupiers want, is bring your whole self, be yourself at the office. And I love what you're saying about specific curation, because I joke around a lot, like, why does TikTok know me better than my boss? Right? If I go on TikTok, there's 15 videos in a row of stuff that I want to see, whether it's cute puppies or golf courses or whatever. this thing knows me incredibly well because my data is pretty easy to find in the world, right? This is like, I'm sure that our kids are going to look back at how much data we gave away and be like, oh my God, what were our parents thinking? But how is it
They
that
weren't.
yeah, dude, we were trying to get our music on our phones. What's the deal? But it's like, it's interesting to me that there are so many avenues out there to be able to know exactly who I am and exactly what I want and exactly what I want to do. And a lot of times these decisions that are being made around what's going into the building as an amenity is being made, in a vacuum by two guys who like kind of have good taste. Oh, let's put a gym in there. That'll
Yeah,
work.
no, and that it's incredible how often that happens.
Right.
And the other thing, what really challenges this as well, Kevin, is it's valuation basis. And again, this is not, I mean, you can't just pivot to a new model. Most major commercial assets are financed. There's an established basis of valuation. It's based around traditional leases. So moving to a new model, it can't. It's so hard to see how that can just happen really quickly. It's an incremental change. Um, that's another one of the complications. And it's another one of the things that I think makes this happen over a period of time rather than something that we waken up and realize has happened in 2024.
Yeah.
But just before we sign off, Kevin, I want to ask you to make one big prediction of something that you think you'll see happen that will be highly impactful in the next 3 years.
I think we're going to see some major legislation that is going to really change how office buildings are valued and how they work, and it's going to, candidly let some landlords off the hook and introduce, funds to be able to do things with these vacant buildings. I mean, sooner or later we're going to have to come to the realization that like there are all these buildings, whatever class they are, they have some value to them. It's not going to be offices anymore because like no matter what we do, there are just some things that people are not going to want to do anymore. And traveling into the office to sit in the room with no windows is probably one of them for at least the foreseeable future. Yeah. So my big prediction is we'll start to see some legislation and some funds introduced by the government of the United States, at least. I'm speaking specifically for the U.S. market, to incentivize these landlords to either give the buildings up to some sort of, like government agency that's going to do something with them, to house homeless people, to create greener pastures, to create vertical farming. I think that there's going to be sort of an intersection of the climate crisis and the housing crisis. I mean, let's be realistic, dude. We've got these two giant problems in the world. The earth is on fire. Nobody can afford a house. And all of a sudden, we have just been given back like 1 billion square feet of office space that nobody ever wants to go again. So like, we should probably be able to figure out how to like make those habitable for somebody and make it a little bit easier to, be inside and, have sort of some refuge from a climate crisis if it were to happen. I mean, it's kind of like pretty insane timing for this to be happening like this. So that's,
Kevin, yeah. And
that's
Kevin, that's one heck of a prediction. But interestingly, it does, that would also accelerate the office world into the type of new model that we're talking about, and the type of new model that I believe it certainly goes to. Buildings will work like organisms or ecosystems in the future. I mean, they're early in the journey to that space, but that will require a whole lot of things, including valuation, to change before they can get quite there.
So what I was saying, the pen is mightier than the sword, right? There's going to have to be some sort of wholesale change. I read this. Somebody in my LinkedIn network posted this, so I'll give them the shout out if they're watching. I don't know who it was, but when basketball was invented, it was the hoop was an actual basket. And for something like 20 or 30 years, Gavin, they played the game at a pretty high level with a physical basket. There was no net at the bottom. Right?
So like a trash can on a pole?
A literal basket, a peach basket. And it was somebody's job at really high levels. They would have somebody with a stool who would go up and grab the ball out of the basket and hand it back to the players, right?
Yep.
And then for a period of about 30 years, people realized that was a terrible, terrible, terrible idea, but they couldn't figure out how to solve it. There's a whole industry, I think this is like the early 1900s, there's a whole industry of mechanisms to pick up the ball out of the peach basket. They even got as far at one point, and we're talking about they're playing basketball in college, or they're playing basketball at a professional level. There's one point where they cut a hole in the bottom of the basket that was about the size of, I don't know, the top of a coffee cup, so that you could use a small stick and poke the bottom of the ball out of and get it out of the basket. It took them 60 years to realize, holy cow, we can just cut the bottom out and put a net in, and the ball will go straight through. And now it's a completely different game. So I think right now, to kind of circle back this analogy, right now we are in the position of the office world where nobody has cut the hole out of the bottom of the hoop yet. Right? We're still kind of playing around with the game of, how do we fish this thing out of here? How do we use a stool? And I think that eventually, whether it's legislation, some capital markets valuation that changes the game, or just some good idea that gets a building to be actually, like valued by human beings, not just financial institutions or companies, but by human beings, then we'll kind of be in a completely new era where the game has changed and we're not throwing foul shots granny style. We're doing 360 windmill jams. You know what I mean?
Look, Kevin, I think that's a great place to end, and with another one of your tremendous analogies. And but this is such an interesting space to watch. A great place to be in the industry. I think it's the most exciting time in my career to be involved around office. I mean, not without its challenges at the moment, but there's huge opportunity ahead. And just leaves it for me today, Kevin Anderson, to thank you very much for joining us on the PropNext podcast. And I hope we can do another one soon. Kevin, thank you very much.
Recorded or unrecorded, I love talking with you, Gavin. I would do it till my face turns blue.
Thank you very much. And look,
thanks for having me.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
So that's a wrap for today's podcast. And it just leaves it for me to thank you very much for tuning in and listening to our conversation. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you'd like any information or you want to have a chat, drop me a line on Gavin R. Morgan at propnext.com, GAVINRMORGAN at propnext.com. Or there's more information, as I said earlier, too, on www.propnext.com. That's www.propnx.com. I look forward to speaking with you in future podcasts, hopefully, and thank you again for your time.